Oh, it's just me now. No one can hear me. Just me and my Guinness can. Listen to this sound effect. Sounds like a wet fart or delicious Guinness can. Oh, that. Yeah. I'm wearing the headphones and a nice quality microphone. I could just be down here by myself for hours, just making noises. Beep bop, dip dip bop bop. ASMR. Guinness beer, Guinness beer.
What about a drone crashing into a lake?
I flew a drone like straight into a lake.
Was it an expensive drone?
Yeah, it was Ichabod Jr. with a Hero 7, I think. Yeah, it was a 7. So it didn't hurt as much because it was a 7.
Well, that was before the 8 came out.
No, but like the 6 was always more valuable because of real steady. So it was like, oh, at least it was a 7, you know. But it was literally like take off straight into the water because it was this pond. It was like so perfectly still that it reflected right into the sky, and there's like no reference whatsoever.
I think that's still the most terrifying kind of flights for me right now. Is like it's like when you can't tell the difference between the horizon and the water. Like you're just like, I'm too low, I'm too high, I'm too low, I'm too low. Because you're always trying to push it as low as you possibly can. But
yeah. I mean, when we were chasing John's boat, he had like one of these like hydrofoil racing boats. So while we were chasing it, it was fine because we had plenty to look at. And then in between flights, I went to take off, and then there was nothing to see, and I just went like right into the water. I just hear all this screaming before I went in the water. Like, why are they screaming?
Was that you screaming, or was that?
No, it was everyone else because I thought I was fine. You know.
Yeah, well, we've been seeing Andy fly this like brand new prototype around, for that weekend, and we knew how special it was. That was right when Real Steady Go came out, so you had a bunch of footage on there too. I think you were shooting for that.
Oh yeah.
There was like a promo something, it was important.
No, it wasn't that
and
bad. It was the guys had all the cool stuff on it. That
yeah.
still
Well, either way, it was important enough for you to go in there and scoot around for about 2 days.
Did you end up finding it?
Did you find it, Andy?
No, even though I was in the pond for like an hour.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. There was a couple people I think that ended up going in there with you, but
Yeah.
I've lost. I mean, shit. Way to bring it down, Nurk. We don't want to talk about.
Well, the thing was, like, as soon as it went in, I thought it was a lost cause. But then I got peer pressured into going in to find it because it wasn't that far out. You could like walk out to it, but it was hopeless. Yeah.
You know what? Here at the Good Flight, we want to highlight the stories, right? We want to talk about the good flights, the bad flights. If we have, there's some bonding that happens as a result of that, right? So even though it wasn't a perfectly executed flight of a drone, you made memories, you connected on a level beyond what you already were. And so I think for that, it's also become its own good flight. Today's guest is the magnanimous Andy Shen, the Brooklyn-based drone frame designer, pilot extraordinaire. I've been a huge fan of Andy for so long, and I'm super excited to have brought him on as our third official guest on the Good Flight. I think, in the spirit of telling the stories of good flights, whether that's in, professional FPV or cinema or industrial equipment, I think that Andy is going to have a lot of good flight stories to share with us. So I'm really excited to be bringing him on. Did I say Brooklyn? I meant Manhattan. Whatever. Somebody wrote Brooklyn into the notes and that got stuck. But actually, speaking about the city, I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about what kind of good flights are you having even during lockdown and quarantine? How has it changed the landscape of the city? It just in terms of that, like, it's a part of where we are. in the world right now. And I think that everybody would be interested to know kind of your perspective as someone that is in the thick of it. No pun intended.
Well,
It's too good to not acknowledge that. That was beautiful.
yeah. I mean, the field I use all the time is in East River Park, where I once got arrested just because it was one of those weeks where they had a quota. So they were out just rounding people up. So we got rounded up. The charges got dropped, but we still got thrown in a drunk tank for 4 or 5 hours. We still had to go to court. Still had to get a lawyer.
Who's we?
So there's 3 of us. Well, I'm not going to name them, but it was like one guy literally that came out flying with us for the first time ever.
Flight.
So I've heard and I've seen some firsthand experience of the cops at NYPD seizing equipment, but they actually locked you up.
Yeah, well, they were kind of sneaky about it. They came up. I was like walking back, and I see the cops walking over. It's like, oh crap. And they were kind of sneaky about it because they were saying like, can you just like pack up? We're going to give you a summons.
Right.
So we're all pretty like low key about it. It's like, okay, we'll just get a ticket, we'll fight it, whatever, And so we're all packing up, and I turn around, and one of the guys is in cuffs. And then once they put you in cuffs, they're not going to take it off. It's like at that point, it's past the point of arguing about it, and we're like, what law are we breaking here? And all they said was, since 9/11, you can't do not since 9/11.
Which is totally not true, by the way. It's been like since since the 1920s or something. The avigation law. Anyway.
But I mean, what it really told us was that they didn't know what the law was. They just had a quota to fill, and they weren't really going to listen to any discussion or anything. They're just going to take us. So I was like, all right, go ahead and cuff us. And they ran out of handcuffs. So one guy just had to put his hands behind his back and pretend he was cuffed.
Jeez. And then did he run? I mean, come on.
That's the opposite of civil disobedience. Like, okay, I'm cuffed, I promise.
And he's like, I got some zip ties in my bag. Do you want to just use these? I mean,
let me help you out,
Gee.
So they took us in, put us in a drunk tank, and I think they just leave us in there out of spite for as long as possible, just to be dicks about it. And the funny thing was, I had like a smartwatch, so I was still getting. They took our phones, right? So we're bored senseless. I was still getting like text updates, and I was like getting Slack updates. So I was like not so bored. And at some point, they figured it out and turned off my phone. It's like, oh shit, now I'm like super bored. And then I don't
this would be like getting customer orders on your watch, and you're like, I'll get to it as soon as I can. I'm literally
orders coming in. It's like making me feel better. But, so I don't drive, so I don't have a driver's license, and I didn't have an ID on me. So the other 2 guys, they processed, and they said, well, you don't have an ID. And usually when someone gets arrested without an ID, we take them to Rikers. I look at the cop, and I'm like, so that's a little disproportionate. And he's like, yeah, I know. Well, what can you do? So, one of the other guys that was getting
me to Rikers.
I know, yeah, for what? So I like gave him my keys, and I told him, where my passport was. Like, can you go to my apartment, get my passport, come back? He's like, yeah, sure. So he goes, and he's gone for an hour. About an hour into that, I realized like, oh shit, I just traveled, and my passport's not where I thought it was.
Oh no.
So pretty soon after that, I couldn't do anything, but he came back. He actually found it. He actually like went through my apartment, found my passport, brought it back.
He didn't find the other stuff.
Yeah, and got me out. And
those lipos that are not properly stored.
Dude, actually, your apartment could probably look pretty sketchy to someone uninitiated.
Well, no, but he was a friend of mine,
Oh, okay.
Drone guy. It's cool. So
I thought you gave your keys to the cop.
No.
Like, what?
To one of the guys I got arrested with. So he went and got my passport.
I got you.
Yeah. So I had like a few drones with me. So the cop was like trying to be a nice guy about it. He's like, I'll take the smallest one because I have to confiscate something, So I took like a little 4-inch drone and let us out. But then I had to get a lawyer to make sure that nothing went on my permanent record. And just in case, like it turned out to be serious. But then like 3 or 4 months later, I got a court date, went to court, and the lawyer was supposed to meet me there. And he texts me like, oh, I'm running late, wait for me. Meanwhile, like stuff is already starting. And so they call me up, like a first person called, and go up. And the clerk just says, case is dismissed, get out of here.
What?
And that was it. They literally had no case, had no like no intent of like trying anything. So clearly they just wanted to round people up to fill a quota and harass people, So then from there I had to go to evidence control and then, get my drone back, which had been like heat shrunk, heat shrink it on a piece of cardboard until it's like as flat as possible. And this is like back in the days when you had those like circular polarized antennas, so it was like a smush thing.
Oh
like,
yeah.
There you go. So anyway, the whole point of this long story is having once been arrested flying in Manhattan, now in lockdown, I'm super scared to go flying because, I don't want to be thrown in a drunk tank and test, like catch the virus. So
Sure.
it's like a little, it's pretty sketchy now. So when I'm desperate, super desperate, I'll go out at like 3 or 4 a.m. and do a few passes on my street, which I never could do before, but now I can do because there's no one out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get a good result out of that. Now I'll go at dawn out to the same park where I was arrested, do a couple of batteries, come back home, like with more light, So that's
just
pretty
trying to
much
get there during shift change.
Yeah, it's pretty much all the flying I can do now.
I'm really sorry to hear that. It's it was I got to come out there to New York with you and fly that spot and like that iconic spot. And it was a privilege. And so when we can't kind of scratch that itch, like I feel for you.
Well,
Like it hurts.
we're not all like you. We all can't freestyle around your house, and you have your
You can come
neighbors
to my house and
there.
freestyle at any time. There's a bedroom right there. You're welcome to come crash.
Well, we're leading it off with two really, really positive stories here, man. This is going good.
Downer, man.
Or no, it's all right. We're leaving all the good stuff, I guess, for the meat of the episode.
Yeah. But yeah, let's bounce back. I mean, so I would pick you as one of the kind of like forefathers of FPV in a way, and because you've been around from the beginning. You were one of the first people to start putting, smaller mini quad sized drones as opposed to like the flame wheel sized stuff that we were all stuck with in 13 14. So can you kind of rewind time for us a little bit, tell us a little bit what it was like kind of back in the Wild West and in the first like few projects that you started to work on as as a forefather of FPV?
Well, I wouldn't call myself that, but I do remember when there was a time when people thought 8-inch props were the standard, and I do remember when Blackout first came out, and like everyone was like, "Wow,"
What is what is Blackout? I don't know what that is.
Oh, he's a guy. I think is he Australian? He called himself like Blackout the Drunk. So he made a 5-inch. He made a 5-inch quad when everyone thought 8-inch. Everyone was kind of sort of gravitating towards 8 inches standard. So he made a 5-inch quad, and he made all these videos of himself flying around like totally insane. Like flying over tree canopies and diving through them, and then
doing proximity flight.
Yeah, pretty early on, he got Boris and Danny, right? He sponsored Boris and Danny, and they were like the most badass guys at the time.
Boris being Boris B of
Beta
Flight,
and Danny, Danny Metal
Danny.
Metal Danny
was way back in the day. Like that was he was actually one of my favorites for the longest time because he was just always so hardcore, just flying race laps through the woods and places where you're like, I'm gonna destroy everything, and everything broke back then too. Like you couldn't smash into a gate and hope that your quad would be fine. Like so Blackout sponsored Metal Danny and Boris B.
And like Metal Danny was like a super tattooed up motocross guy, and I think it was Metal Danny because like so many body parts were metal.
Which was always a cool story for me because like that was something that I would tell some friends and reporters is like like it does have that adrenaline effect on like flying FPV has adrenaline effect on you because it scratches the itch of like even some of these extreme sports guys that are normally out there putting their bodies on the line, but they can just fly a little drone and get that same kind of rush. And I thought that was a really cool example back in the day.
Plus, you were trying to call yourself Metal Nurk, right? You're like, I'm Metal Nurk, carbon fiber Nurk, or
metal Boba Fett back in the day, actually. But so the Blackout came out, and
let's see. I'm trying to think. Well, what sort of got me on the map was at some point, some people started flying out around 4-inch quads, because somehow they decided that 4 inches was cooler than 5, and there wasn't like a readily available 4-inch frame, so I made the tweaker, and that was sort of like the first really available 4-inch frame. That sort of got me on the map, and
My buddy
uh,
Pizzy, who was like my oldest FPV friend, had like 5 or 6 tweakers across a year that he would always race, and he loved it so much. So I actually don't think I ever had one, but I saw his all the time, and it was cool to
yeah.
see that influence on everything.
I
Yeah.
think I got one back there from that Clint built. I
Oh,
bought from
cool.
him.
It was kind of fun because right around, it was right around the time of Breaking Bad, and someone had made a joke about how we're all FPV tweakers, and that's how it became named the tweaker. So then I put in like packets of blue sugar candy with every frame.
That's right.
So, that was kind of fun, but then it was kind of, after a while, it got kind of tiresome to like pack blue sugar candy with every frame. But from there, people kind of realize that X frames are faster, that if you lose that big flat body of the H frame, there was a lot of drag lost. And
Because
then,
the tweaker had the straight back arms and then the like catted front arms. Yeah.
everything was an H frame, back then.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't like there were X frames that people like Quad Mover were flying, but they weren't FPV X frames. And so, some people were sort of just kind of like putting a FPV cam on top of a stack, and it wasn't secure or protected or anything. So I made the Krieger, and that, it was like an X 5-inch frame with, vertical stanchions that held the FPV cam. And so, I just
What
kind of
year was this? When did the tweaker and the Krieger come out roughly?
I couldn't. I would
It
maybe
would have
20,
been
maybe 16. I don't know, 15 or
because
16. I'm not
after
sure.
Nationals 2015. So Nationals 2015 DSA California, nobody really had like good mini quads yet. There was like the Alien and the
Right,
Black Bolt XBR. Like those were the
right,
only
right,
two.
right,
Like,
right.
and then I remember by the time DSA Nationals 2016 happened, there were a lot of Kriegers and like sort of X style
By the
frames.
time of 2016 was right when Racecraft had their skinny arm.
It's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So racecraft,
yeah,
I think they really came out the door with the props. Like they had the really super
right.
aggressive, choppy, angly props, and they released a super skinny, like just like utterly ridiculous. Like if you looked at it, it's gonna break kind of frame.
Yep.
And they didn't care. They were on the side of like, we're gonna make this the ultimate fast machine. It's not durable. And that was after the Krieger was released, I assume.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So they kind of said, this is the Krieger, this is great, let's make a smaller, twitchier, faster version.
Yeah. And I
But
don't
yeah,
think they ever released the frame, but they changed everything just
yeah.
by releasing the concept. And I remember Lumineer jumped on it really quickly. They had like a super light frame right away.
Yeah.
And they had one at Nationals.
Walk me through like one of the more difficult parts of, designing and building a drone at that time back in the day. Was it finding a kit of parts that would work well together, that would fit into these frames? Was it even like sourcing the right propellers? Because I don't remember there being that many options available at that time for props itself.
I mean, it's kind of funny. I remember when Dow came out with their unbreakable props, and what a big deal that was. Like, guys would like fly their drones into the ground, like pick it up, like, look, it didn't break. Because like just before that was when, yeah.
I just happen
But
to have one sitting here for some reason.
just before the Dow Unbreakables
Shout out to
was
Dow.
was everyone was using was like HQ that were like, if you like touched anything, it would just like shatter and explode.
Yeah, the composite polycarbonate. Yeah. If you looked at it the wrong way, they would explode.
So there was all types of stuff to consider, finding out a solution or whatnot, but you didn't have the plethora of options available. Plus your stacks were different, back then, and everything was larger. The video transmitter, right?
Yeah, and it was all like so much worse.
Big cameras too. The FPV cameras were like,
Yeah.
freaking.
No, it's like, do you remember when KISS came out with 30 amp ESCs and how excited we all were?
Yeah.
Oh, who's the Australian guy who won the first Nationals?
Chad Nowak. Final Glide.
Yes. He did like a promo video with the KISS 30 amps, and everyone freaked out. Like, oh my God, like 30 amps on an ESC.
But like, so back in the day, there was a much more limited size, like type of components. They were big, they were cumbersome. Like what, compared between today and back then, like what sort of design challenges did you face to bring, high performance machines kind of forward, versus what you are experiencing now, just relative to each other? Like, how has the design process changed over the years?
Yeah, how hard was it compared to now?
Well, the big thing right around, concurrent with when Racecraft did the skinny arm thing was when 4-in-1s, at that time, 4-in-1s did exist, but everyone was like, I'm not touching that. I'm not going to like buy 4 ESCs in one component and one of them blows out, I'm going to lose the whole thing. Once that skinny arm kind of idea came around, it was sort of like, well, there's no point in getting a skinny arm drone and putting a big fat ESC on that arm. So then the 4-in-1 kind of thing kind of really took hold. Whereas, before that, no one would really go for it. So once the 4-in-1 kind of took hold, then that changed a lot in terms of drone design, because then, before that, I remember I made the Krieger arms 20 millimeters across, I'm pretty sure, because that was the width of a Rotor Geeks 20 amp ESC, because that was the whole point. It's like, well, I'm going to put the ESC on this arm and I might as well make it exactly as wide as the ESC, because I can make it thinner, but then there's still going to be that much drag from the ESC. So what's the point? Might as well make it as strong as possible, make it equal to the width of the ESC. So once you went to 4-in-1s, that changed, the whole thinking around the arms, so that was like a big deal in terms of design.
How did that influence your designs then at that point? So like once the 4-in-1s come into play and the arms are skinnier and people are like less worried about durability and are focusing on performance, like what does that do to kind of change the outlook of the next few frames?
Yeah, well, but initial reaction to the Racecraft drone was that, wow, this thing is really light. And people were thinking about it in terms of lightness. And then I kind of did some, like sort of stand tests, and I realized that, okay, it's a little bit lighter, but what it really was doing was that the arms were blocking so much less thrust. So, the big difference was that you're getting a lot more power out of the same, everything else being the same. When you have a skinnier arm, you get a lot more power. So like if you want to go fast, you can increase power or reduce drag, or increase power or increase efficiency. And, since I designed frames, I was like focused on efficiency. So I kept like looking at things like making the frame more aero, like making the arm skinnier or whatever. And as it turns out, I think drones are more like dune buggies than like high-end race cars. So it's like,
Sure.
don't worry about the aerodynamics so much, just like pump in more power, because I think
like a muscle car or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Instead of
just ripping through
like an
the
Indy
air.
car where
Or
they're like
a rally car.
right. Instead of a car where they're so obsessed about every part of the aerodynamics, because I think the aerodynamics the way we think about aerodynamics doesn't work on a drone, because it's all in dirty air and it doesn't react the same way as clean air. So the best thing to do is like just give it more power, give it more voltage. That's the way to just go faster.
Is the same thing true today? I mean, there's people that are building like 12S mini quads now.
Those guys are weird.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Is that the same thing you think today? Or Nurk, what's your opinion there on that?
I think that the upper limit on speed today is pilot dependent. I think in terms of like performance on track, right? There's maybe 5 people in the world that can outfly their equipment. I'm not included. I do not include myself in that. Like if you're looking at like a Minchan Kim, like a Evan Turner, a Vanover, where they're on drones that they're actually taking advantage of to the maximum edge, and even still, you see them find ways to increase performance on tracks over a certain period of time. So I don't think that anyone is outflying their gear yet. So I don't think that there needs to be another step in technology until we as humans get to the point where we're outflying that equipment. I think that there's
from a speed perspective, right? Like, advancements in
right.
technology from like acceleration or just top end or handling.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
So like if you took a Minchan Kim and you gave him a drone that somehow was 20% faster, I think he's going to be equally as fast on the current setup and the one that's 20% faster, because he can't fly it faster. I'm not saying that he's not capable. I'm saying that he's at the limits of what the human perspective is able to do now,
Okay.
or what his training level so far has been able to achieve. Maybe in a couple of years, then that he can take advantage of 10% more of that speed and 10% more. So I don't think that the limit on our performance as drone racers is on the technology as much as it is on the human performance aspect.
Let me ask you
Personally,
this: is DRL working on getting Minchan Kim?
I do not know of any specifics with that. I would
Yeah,
assume that the conversation has been had, and I would assume that there's things behind the scenes that we don't know about, like,
yeah.
because for especially for someone as young as Min Chan Kim, there's laws in the United States for child labor, sort of stuff, like not child labor, but like you have to bring in a parent element. You have to be able
Well,
to
how old's Vanover and Heads Up and Evan?
Heads Up is 16, Vanover is 20.
Jesus! Oh my God! Wow.
Yeah. But MCK, I think, is 14, 15,
No,
and then
really?
also
I
not
don't.
from the States. Yeah,
Really?
he's young. So it's I agree that I think there's performance gains to be had on the technology side, but I don't think that many people can take advantage of increased technology. I think in an equivalent sort of environment, there's still a lot to be had on the human condition side of going fast. But that's true for anything, car racing. I mean, there's increments to be had on cars, but you put different drivers in different cars and different things happen. So it's all there's too many variables to keep in mind. Yeah, it's crazy.
And that's part of what you love about racing, right? Nurk, correct me if I'm wrong, but you love that like human element, that edge, and trying to kind of explore it within yourself, right? Isn't that kind of what you try to practice and get better at when you are practicing? It's like that mental game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's fun about racing is not that you're out to compete against everyone else. It's that you're there to improve yourself again and again and again, that you're there to best yourself. So if I go out and I put in the work and I see the results, there's an instant gratification, instant verification that the work that I did and the hypothesis that I set aside to achieve something is there. And so for me, the thing that's most excited about drone racing is not necessarily winning against my opponents, but doing better than I had expected for myself, because then it's okay, I'm on the right track now. How do I take this to the next step and the next step and the next step? It's that kind of continuous self-improvement, which I
I thought
assume.
I thought what you liked about drone racing was like taking pictures with yourself with your competitors' mothers.
The
Well,
chicks,
that's fun too. No, well, that's fun too.
the
But
metal.
in if I'm going to elevate my game, right, I need to de-escalate the mental status of my opponents, right? So any way that I can use to get in their heads, to kind of push them to make a mistake, to get them out of that zone, is something that I'm going to take advantage of. And one way that I have found to do that, yes, is taking a
Yeah,
picture with someone else's mother,
And bringing
which
it
you can
to
find all
race.
about. But yeah, so I know of a few pretty interesting Shen drones projects that have happened over the last number of years. I got to see one just recently when we were hanging out with Neil deGrasse Tyson, that carries around beef jerky. What sorts of like weird projects have you gotten to work on, and places have you gone as a direct result of drones?
well, I mean, unfortunately, like one of the coolest things was with you, which you already know about, like meeting Neil deGrasse Tyson. That was
Tell us all about it. Yeah, I want to hear your side of that. What
Yeah.
happened? Like, why?
No, actually, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. So fill me
There
in,
you go.
please.
all
Yeah.
right. Okay. Well, Nerd came to town to do some testing
End of
with
story.
our mutual friend Justin on
Justin,
the
shout out
big
to
guy, the
Justin.
big boy.
He's
Yeah.
definitely listening. I know he's here.
Somehow he's listening live, even though the show
Uh,
isn't
I
live.
kind of feel like he
so
is.
Nerd came to town to help test this big thing with
What are
Justin.
you holding? It looks like you're holding up the thick there. Is that what that is?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for those of us that are listening.
This is
The
like the
thick is
newly
a is a
updated
is a what size props are those?
7-inch.
We got 8 motors flying 7-inch
Yes.
props on 4 arms. It's basically a mini version of the X8 that I fly for work a lot, and it's easily liftable in the palm of Andy's hand. It's pretty cool looking. It's terrifying looking, honestly.
It really is.
It looks like something you get arrested for flying in Manhattan, to be honest.
Oddly enough, I've been okay so far. But Nurk came to town, and then he kind of like casually brings up like, oh, by the way, I'm doing a podcast with
Some guy.
NDT. Yeah, and so I'm like, oh, please let me just tag along. Let me just be your little B-roll bitch.
Battery bitch.
Battery, yeah.
Yeah. So we got to go and hang out with Neil deGrasse Tyson, which was super coul. I will say that he is like a super cool guy. He's very genuine. He's exactly what you see. And like his public persona is, unless what we were seeing was also a put on, but he was exactly what you see in public. And also he is like such a teacher that whatever we walk by, we had to stop and he had to like tell us about it. We walked by a picture of like a solar flare. He had to give us like the whole spiel about this is a painting of a solar flare, but solar flares don't really look like that because this is like back when whoever painted this just looked at it through a telescope and they didn't have video cameras, so it was just painting it from memory, and that's why it doesn't look like this. But if you really took a picture of a solar flare now, it doesn't have this particular shape. Like, okay, whoa, But that was like a super cool day. And the other really cool thing about it for me was hanging out with Paul and watching him. Like Paul came up with a like a one take shot through Neil's offices. So we
The
kind of
Hayden Planetarium Physics Department. Yeah.
But down the hallways, it was pretty tight. It wasn't like I imagine. It was a pretty tight little office layout.
It was like a uncomfortable kind of flying situation. So he set up this kind of line where and this is kind of like sort of dictated by I don't want to just say Neil because I'm not on a first name basis with him, but
well, that's what's funny though is like when we got up, like we took the elevator up to the top and there's this like entryway and Neil is sitting on the couch and you're just like, hi, Mr. deGrasse Tyson, or Dr. deGrasse Tyson, nice to meet you. And he's like, oh, it's Neil, it's fine. And I'm like, okay, Dr. Tyson. He's like, no, Neil. Okay, Neil. I totally feel you on that.
Yeah, but it's like we were like kind of like talking about what line Paul would fly, and he was like, oh no, but you got to hover over this guy. And you got to hover. Oh no, that's Ptolemy. You got to hover over him, and then you got to. Oh, then you got to look at this. Then you got to come down here, and you got to look at this statue, and then I'm gonna write equations on this blackboard, and I want you to like scan the equations here, and then I want you to come down here, and then like look at my colleague through his office window, and I'm thinking like these hallways are like what 4 or 5 feet wide, and so like
New York office space, like it was tight,
From my perspective, I would be like, yeah, it's better if we just keep it moving along, but you did do that. You made this drone into a character. I didn't realize that was kind of directed or influenced.
But the cool thing about being there in person was that I saw Paul fly it like 5 or 6 times, identically every time, and he didn't tap anything ever. Like he flew into an office, kind of, like interacted with Neil and backed out, went down the hallway, did all that stuff. There's one point where he's going down the hallway and he's like, instead of just going down the hallway, let's turn sideways, fly sideways down the hallway so we can look at the planetarium. He did that every time. It's just like,
You were waiting for the crash, weren't you?
Yeah, I was when I was watching it. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I love about FPV is the crash.
In all, yet in having complete faith.
It was an incredible opportunity. But like, so what, why was that a big deal for you? Like, what? I kind of, when we started talking, like I kind of recognized that, like that passion, that excitement of the opportunity. Like, why, what influences has Neil had on you, and why was that exciting for you to be able to go and spend time there?
It was just more like crossing over, because so much of what we do is in our own little world, and then we show our videos to each other, and we're like, oh yeah, that's awesome, but it's all in our own little circle. But then once you break out of that, that's when you kind of realize like, oh wow, something's happening. Like this is it's sort of like when you see stuff in like big productions or in in a video that goes viral to people that are interested in drones at all. That's when you sort of realize like, oh, this could be something cool.
Do you feel that way regularly, that kind of drive to get more people to experience drones, FPV in general?
Well, it's not so much about drones. It's sort of like when people think it's cool without knowing what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
What about that? Why does kind of not knowing about something and experiencing it for the first time, like what about that excites you? Why do you want to have more people experience that?
it's sort of like when like the first time, like in Goodfellas, when they first had. Now I'm getting into John's territory here, so I'm going to be like
Perfect.
sound like but like the first Steadicam shot in Goodfellas.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure it wasn't
That's
the
that
first
long
one, but
one
it
where
might
they
have been
walk
one of
down
the.
into the
Yeah,
basement and
it
then down
might have
through.
been one of like the first big ones. It's sort of like a lot of like most people just watching the movie don't realize it. Some people might have said, hey, that's a really long shot. That's kind of cool. And then I'm sure people in the business were like, oh my god, how they do that? But it's sort of like that thing where most people would just say that's pretty cool. Some people would be like, how did they do that? And then people in the know would be like freaking out, like that to me is sort of that when it gets kind of exciting.
Well, what do you think? Well, it sounds like Neil was pretty excited. I mean, I did see the video. I do know what you guys are talking about, but it's great to hear it from you guys. But what about Neil's reaction do you think he was feeling? Because you enabled him to have this fantasy camera float around his life, in ways in hopes of capturing his life or tell this story like they've never been able to do before. Even though the camera was moving indoors in a hallway, essentially along the same path that a handheld camera could travel, but it did not travel like a handheld camera. So what about, I mean, because Neil, I mean, I know he was interested in the technology, but he clearly wasn't a drone user. He didn't have his own FPV thing. He didn't say, hey, I know what these goggles are. He put them on for like the first time and he was like almost bewildered, like this is the camera.
I remember he kept smacking my leg. He was like, dude, you're over there. And I'm like, yeah, I'm right here, Neil. It's fine.
But
Well,
what about that, that Neil, like that emotion that he had, that first experience I think that's what we're talking about.
I would say Paul kind of like ruined it in a way because he did it so well that he thinks that's how it just happens. He did it like it's like when someone does it 5 times in a row again and again, he probably thought like, oh, this is just how these things work. Like if you had crashed a few times and like, oh my god, let me try it again. I think I can get it. Then he might have been more impressed. But you did it so well. He was just like so matter of fact. Oh yeah, this is what drones do.
I might have slipped into production mode instead of drone enthusiast mode. That might have happened.
Well, you know what? I mean, that's my only goal out there when I walk on set is you got to make it look easy, even though it might be the most difficult shot of your career. You got to make it look easy, which is like never let him see a sweat type of thing. And you got to get the hell out of there with your head on your shoulders. That's the other thing, which means don't beef it, don't crash it. And sounds like you did all of those things. So mark of a true professional there.
We had a good time. We had a really good time. That's one of my favorite days. I'm glad you were there to share it with me, Andy.
Oh, that was so much fun. But I mean, that was one of those rare instances where it was like a high visibility kind of thing. But I mean, speaking for myself, I can't speak for you, maybe, but it was like fairly low stress. But usually for that level of visibility, there would be like a lot more stress, which is like more like John's world, where when you're on like a film set, there's like a lot more element of terror.
John, how do you manage stress and terror and that sort of stuff on set? Like what do you do to mitigate the pressure of having to get through those moments every single time? I know what my answer would be.
Yeah.
It's usually influenced by racing,
right?
But from a pleb's perspective, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, I always like to think, and I do believe this, the easiest part of my job is actually when we're flying the drone. Most of the time when we're trying to film something in a cinematic nature, the drone is not moving at 100 miles an hour. It's moving very relatively slowly, and our goal is to achieve as smooth as possible. I rely on my crew a lot. Dexter, Kennedy, guys like James Sykes, people that I've worked with for years and years.
The diddler.
We're not going into a shot like not knowing that our shit's gonna fall out of the sky. We know it's going to work. We know what we're there to do. And, the stress kind of, it's like, I guess it's like when you're sitting in the driver's seat of a car, for me, it kind of melts away. And that's kind of the fun part. I definitely feel stress, especially when you have a director in your left ear and you're trying to talk to your pilot in the right ear, translate back and forth. And, but
John, are you usually cam up or piloting?
I do actually. That's a good question, Andy. I do a lot of both, a fair amount of both. I want to say it's almost like 50-50, which
I mean, what do you prefer?
that's also a really good question. And I get that a lot too. I've actually had people like try to make me choose and I like won't choose because there's a part of me that really loves camera operating because you're designing the shot. The way I work and the way I think a lot of people do work is the camera operator is listening to the director's input and you're translating that to the pilot, telling the pilot where to fly the drone. But that translation, there's a lot of gray area. So you have the ability to design the shots a lot of times on the fly. And sometimes the director says, I don't even, just track this car. So we're riffing the entire time. So you kind of have free reign to direct. You're now sitting in the director's seat and camera operating, and you got to nail it. And I think a harder job, and this is obviously dependent on what the particular shot is, but there's many shots, I think actually more often, that the camera operator has a more difficult job, or it's easier to fuck it up, as a camera operator, because any small move on the sticks gets directly translated to the camera. Versus a drone pilot, you can, you're constantly feathering the throttle or feathering the cyclic, the right stick. And those moves, the gimbals are so good now in these cameras that those don't get necessarily translated. Sometimes you look at the drone and it's like in a crosswind or something, completely sideways, getting bucked around. And then you look down at your footage and you're on a 35 millimeter lens and you're like, looks freaking great. So I do love flying though, because ultimately you're there to get like the best shot. And it's just, you're flying the thing. I mean, I'm a pilot at heart, so it's hard. I won't answer that question.
If you had like a career defining shot on a job, which job do you choose?
Yeah, I think it would be The Greatest Showman. Something I think we briefly talked about before, but it was an indoor drone catch.
No, but which do you cam up or do you fly?
Yeah, so he's saying you have a career-defining shot.
Oh.
You have to pick, am I gonna operate the camera or am I gonna operate the drone?
I think it depends on who my crew is.
It doesn't depend.
It does. It depends on who my crew is, because
if the flying is really difficult, then maybe you choose to fly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I work with some of the best talent, and from a operator's perspective, it just depends. Like Dexter Kennedy is a fantastic pilot. I know he's going to put that drone exactly where I ask him to put it. Yeah. It's fucking awesome camera operating for somebody like that. It's like more fun, because the last thing you want to be doing is sitting in the camera operator's seat, pointing the camera, and you're asking the pilot to do something and they can't do it, or they're not doing it, or they're struggling doing it. And then you want to feel like, hey, just like, let me do it type of thing. That doesn't really happen with the people that I work with, thank God. So there's guys like I just mentioned, like James Sykes, who's a hell of a fucking pilot. We do a lot of the race car stuff together, and the Ferrari Challenge work, he's flying that drone, I'm camera operating. He'll tell you that's a harder job to camera operate on it, because you have to track race cars going 120 miles an hour and stuff like that. He's flying the same line over and over, and but I'll let him tell you that. But yeah, it depends. I mean, a career defining shot, I think the pilot gets a little bit more of the glory, if you will, maybe from the showrunners or the directors that are seeing the guy flying the drone and thinking that that person solely is the reason why they were successful. But
they have cam operators in their crew as is, right? So, but the pilot's the outlier, right?
Pilot, yeah, exactly. The pilot's the outlier, and sometimes we do use the camera operators on set.
Right. We have done. Would you call a drone operator like a glorified grip in a way? Because like normally it'd just be like the guy that operates the tripod.
That brings or pushing the dolly along, kind of, maybe. And in a world where that may be how it is in 20 years. The grip is actually the pilot, and there's debates right now in the union as far as where does the pilot fit, because right now we are non-union. You cannot be a union operator of drones on set. So You're not in local 600, which is where the cinematographers are, and you're not in 52, which is where the grips are. So they will not let you be in the union and be on set because of liability. And it all boils down to insurance, and aerial insurance is expensive. And now you're on an employee of the production. And so we'll get some experts on and to discuss this particular, in a future episode or something like that. But yeah, maybe in the future you will be a grip flying the drone, and if you're pointing the camera, you'll be in local 600, you'll be a camera operator. But right now it's so far from what the grips know. A lot of grips have drones, which is cool. So you'll be on set and you'll talk to some grips and they have their own personal DJI drones or something like that. And
they're
you can kind of
definitely very curious about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's moving the camera at the end of the day. It's like the drone is the ultimate fantasy tool. You can almost instantly, get these beautiful cinematic dolly shots that you normally have to lay down track for 3 hours to figure it out. And, it enables these grips to create their own content themselves, and it's fun. But honestly, I think, we're always interested in meeting people that want to take the drone service industry to where we are taking it. But it's hard to find people that dedicated and that devoted. So it's a very much, if you're the drone crew is very much a specialized thing, not like grips at this time, not like, a camera operator, which is normal unless we're using the wheels. But then even still, the camera operator has to understand how drones fly to direct the drone,
Right.
You have to. It helps me be a better camera operator because I pilot drones, and it helps me be a better camera operator or a pilot because I'm a camera operator. So
yeah.
Anyway, enough about me. Let's get back to Neil.
Let me bring the two worlds together.
Yeah, please.
It's like, how do we see FPV and cinematics coming together? Because, like we're saying, we're talking about flying bigger and bigger cameras, FPV. And we know we can fly a Blackmagic fully acro, like doing Matty stunts moves in tight spaces. So how do we bring, your two worlds together? And do you see it happening? Do you see cinematographers? I've talked to Justin where he says like he does camera tests with these cinematographers, and the guy will look at like an FPV move for a second. It's like, no, get that away from me.
Yeah, that is a good question, and honestly, answering that question might be the biggest reason why I am attracted to FPV in the first place. I'm trying to figure out what the directors of photography could like about this style of shot and how I could use it as a tool to offer up to those filmmakers, because I've been in situations where my DJI Inspire 2 or my Alta 8 couldn't achieve a certain shot because it just didn't fly like that. I'm talking about specific shots like, hey, fly like a bird, here and drop down through the trees, like where you're literally a POV of a bird. Or Shazam was a movie shot in Philadelphia that worked on where like they wanted to you were a superhero and they were flying down the side of a building and out and down and around under a bridge, and we were shooting that with a heavy lift drone on top of a building at night, and it was fucking cold and windy out. But if we had an FPV rig,
you shot on Shazam?
Shazam, yeah.
So
yeah, and we
shut
down.
You got that shot?
I should have known that.
We did get the shot, but it's like it's such a weird thing because it depends on what the type of shot is. We were working on a VFX splinter unit, so they were taking plates. They were essentially taking still frames from 8K footage that we were doing, and then in post and visual effects, they were using that to then rebuild this shot that they already shot over green screen. So when I saw Shazam on an airplane, I mean, shit. When I saw Shazam, I didn't I was like, I'm like looking for this footage that we worked on, and I didn't really recognize any of it. And I was like, okay, sure. That wouldn't be the first time like we shoot something and then like it's just never even seen again.
Yeah.
Which, but I then worked with the DP again on a different show, And I kind of said that. I was like, hey, like, how did Shazam come out? You know, like, good movie, right? You know, it was a good movie. I thought it was really good. It was
I
cute.
love Zachary Levi. It was fun.
Yeah, I liked it. And I got to give it another watch. But so anyway, he said, "Oh, you guys crushed it." Yeah, I was like, "Did we even use did you use any of the work? Did it turn out? Was it worth it?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I don't, whether he was pulling my leg or not, he was very sincere, I thought, about saying we did use it.
Well, he hired you again.
What they wanted.
Hired you again, right?
Yeah, he hired us again, and he was loving that shit too.
That's the ultimate.
I mean, how many options are there in Philly, though? I mean,
well, we were in New York and Philly, so yeah, quite a bit. But
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no. So anyway, going back to the matter of the fact is, he actually mentioned on this same on another project he was working on, he was going to be going to Vegas and doing the same type of dive stunt or dive shot down the side of a building. And at that time, it was right before I was working on this Beast class drone I have in the back there. And I would kind of tease this out. I kind of put it out there and said, hey, like, what if we could actually, do that shot for real? So, and he was absolutely intrigued. Yeah. Practical
effects.
But it doesn't mean we're getting the call for it. I think it's something that FPV. Yeah.
Mr. Steele is getting the call for it.
Yeah. Mr. Steele or Nurk's getting the call for it. Exactly. But, it should be, in my opinion, it should be a tool that you are ready to perform, Yeah. And there's this big issue with camera quality. They're not going to, like Nurk said before, they're not going to use a GoPro on a feature or something like that. They just won't cut it. So, how do you put a bigger camera on it and then do the same type of move? But even still, it's only a few seconds of that shot. It's very niche right now, is in my opinion.
Right. Definitely. You work your ass off and then you see the show and it's like 1 or 2 seconds.
Yeah, and that's obviously the other thing too. It's like you can't beat yourself up too much about it. I beat myself up more about the content I'm putting out on my own FPV videos and stuff like that, because it's a longer format. It's more representative of who I am. But for a lot of times for these films, it's like, we are very, Dexter and I specifically are like very, if we see one little bump in that camera move or something like that, we're pissed.
Yeah.
And then we kind of get over it. And
now that I've seen FPV used in a lot of different things, I know what to expect from what they're looking for. So like, if I don't have like the absolute perfect, smoothest possible freaking flight, I know that it's okay, because they're only looking for that 1 3-second. No, that's 3 seconds is a lot. Like that 2-second cutaway that helps tell that story, that brings people into it. And it's just kind of this one little moment, and it's okay. It's okay to have just that moment and go for just that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on a shoot with Randy Slavin.
So you were on a shoot with Randy Scott Slavin, which, first of all, could you introduce us to who he is a little bit in his company, and then what were you doing, and how does that kind of tie into this this moment, kind of idea, this idea of like little.
So I was on a shoot with, I worked for about a year as a cam operator for Randy Slavin. He's the guy that does the New York City Drone Film Fest, and he also is Drones, which is like a cinema drone company. So I worked as his camera operator for about a year, and until the whole not being in the union thing became too much of an issue. But we did Billions one day, and it's like the typical kind of thing where you wait all day for your like 5 minutes of terror. And it was over water, so it was like even extra stressful. And the whole shot was that we were going to show a boat do a U-turn. That was a shot. And so we get out there and we're all ready to go. And they're like, hey, Damian Lewis, the star of the show, he's actually going to drive a boat. Oh, how cool. Like, who cares? It's like a long shot. You can't tell, but it's like, oh, he's going to do his own, stunts.
Who cares? That's what they want to hear on set.
So, like we're on our headsets. We have a PA next to me. I'm the cam operator, so I have a PA next to me. He's on his walkie. So we set up the shot, and the boat's going out. All right. It's like, okay, rolling. We're ready. Got the shot all framed up, and it's like, all right, turn around. Tell him to turn around. And he's just like going out in a straight line. And like finally he turns around, and he's like so small in the shot. And we're like, oh my God, let's reset. Let's do it again. We're like, we got it. Let's go. we're losing light. We got like a million other shots left to do, and we're like sitting there like, that's it, we got it. All right, let's go home. Okay,
Yeah.
it's like they're perfectly happy, and then when the show finally comes out like a year later or whatever, it was like a split second of boat starting to turn, and that was it. It's just like you're like, so the whole day we're like game planning this whole thing, how we're going to do this, how we do that, or we're going to communicate with the guy who's like driving the boat and all that. And then we get the actor decides he's going to like be the hero and drive a boat, and he doesn't listen to the instructions, and then they're still happy because they have so many shots to do. They don't care.
Yeah.
For both of you, how does that influence like your planning for a shot, or like how you think about individual shots? Like, having worked on different sets, Andy and John having dealt with a number of different things, like knowing that what you're going to capture is just, a blip on the whole radar of production, which I think is true for anyone that's shooting for something. How does that impact the way you think about cinema?
I mean, you still got to do the best you can do. You still have to, try to, if you think you can do it better, you still have to ask for another take. Doesn't mean they're going to give it to you, but and you never just say like, this is just going to be a split second, this is good enough. That's up to them to do. So you're always trying to do the best you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I mean, we're not like going in before the shot saying, it's only going to be a split second. We talk about that at the bar after the fact.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? That's what you talk about after you wrap, and you're like, oh, it's only going to be a split second anyway. Let's, whatever. But you just have to try to maximize that first take, because you never know if you're going to get a second take. And then on this other hand, you never know if that shot is going to be the opening shot of the thing or of the show, or how long it will be, because they might have to rely on that shot because another camera was screwed up or whatever, for whatever reason.
Has that attitude of make it the best that you can ever created an opportunity for you that you didn't expect?
Yeah, every time, every single shoot, I would say, yeah, absolutely, because every location's always different. What they ask for you is always different, but then what you can bring to the table and influence there, you kind of recall on what your experiences are. And the best thing you can do is just leave it with people just saying, hell yeah, absolutely. Or when they're looking through the footage and then they're just stoked, or they give you a round of applause or something. Basically what we're doing, we're day players. So we kind of show up on the day for a day or two, or sometimes 5 or 6, but it's not typically that much, especially when a show shoots for 3 months. Mm-hmm. And they, a lot of times the crew are seeing the same type of shots over and over again. And then we show up with a flying camera machine thing. It's like the circus, you know what I mean? It's like, what are these guys going to do? You don't know, because at the end of the day, if we don't do anything, they're still going to make a movie. They're still going to make a TV show. Maybe they'll find somebody else in a movie or a TV show for that matter, but they'll figure it out without you. It's your job to go there and try to influence them and give them the confidence and inspire them as filmmakers to say, hey, maybe we can use the drone in this way because these guys nailed it. So that's the best way I could answer that, I guess. You get more opportunities,
So we spent a lot of time talking about big drones.
Yeah.
I like big drones a lot. They do some really cool stuff, but I also really like smaller drones. And I think that our audience would be a little bit remiss if we didn't spend some time talking about cinewhoops. So I feel like a big part of the Shen drones brand over the last few years has been the squirt. And I'm curious to kind of hear your side of the story. Like, I've tried to tell my kind of small end of the story, kind of having, been a little bit a part of the design process to kind of talk about
big part of the whole squirt
yeah,
thing.
yeah, but originally, right? I think a lot of people don't know this, is that it was really a project between you and Gab 707 and kind of influenced by Macintosh.
No, totally wrong.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So please inform everyone. What is the story of the squirt, the cinewhoop, all of that? I want to know your side of that.
So we all know about Robert McIntosh, right? He's like the godfather of, in my opinion, the godfather of cinewhooping, even though...
Yeah. Who's Robert McIntosh for the uneducated? The 30-second version of Robert McIntosh.
I don't even really know. He's like this genius guy who can do everything. He's like so OG, like I remember I saw FPV videos of him flying before I knew who he was. Here's just like one video where he has an apartment on the beach and he
Venice,
takes off.
California.
Yeah, but he takes off like at dawn and flies acro and like, zips around, flies under volleyball nets, flies back and lands back inside his apartment.
It's called like Practice or something, that one,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's Allen Iverson. Like, you talking about practice?
Exactly. And it was like so long ago that, it was like super impressive FPV, not cine, whatever, just FPV video, super cool. And, but he was also, I think he has like a background in filmmaking. So he worked on some movies. He did the title sequence to Help Me Out, Nurk. Super sweet.
Pretty sweet.
Pretty sweet.
Pretty
And that
sweet.
was like a long one take shot with a fairly large drone with a camera on a servo operated gimbal. And if you saw the raw footage, it was like this the whole time, just totally out of control. But it was like a smooth one take thing of him flying. It started out from a close up of a guy, I assume handheld, and he armed and flew, followed a skateboarder, then behind some buildings, and then transitioned from one skateboarder to another to a bunch of series of tricks, and then all the skateboarders came together in a group and like were waving to the drone, and then he had all these what is it,
Firework,
streamer?
confetti
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
confetti
Confetti.
cannons kind of fire up,
Which
all
is
in
like the
one
worst
shot.
nightmare of a drone. Like, I would think,
Yeah,
if anything is going to take you out of the sky, it's a
right.
confetti.
I sat
So
on a panel where not Macintosh, but the director of the film is not
right,
Trip Lee, which is one of them, but I can't. Ty Evans was like, yeah, we weren't sure if the drone was going to fly through that, so like we kind of told all of the skateboarders like, hey guys, there's a potential that this 1,500 gram, 2,000 gram drone is going to come falling out of the sky. So just be aware. Like we don't know what's going to happen.
right.
Safety third.
Yeah, so here's this guy that basically could fly a drone, pretty well, could build a drone, could put a servo on it, put a second operator to operate the camera tilt, I assume, right? I assume someone else operated the camera tilt, and then had the stabilization software to take out the fact that his drone flew like shit. The servo twitched like shit.
100%. Yeah, it was so bad.
Right. I mean, the raw footage was just unusable, and somehow it was usable. So Robert McIntosh is this guy who can do everything. He can fly, he can build drones, he can make the software to stabilize footage, and he has a cinematic eye.
Mhm.
So he had made that video with a long one take on Venice Beach, Muscle Beach. Was that the first? Was that the first one?
Yeah.
I don't think that was the first one.
I mean, I know
It was the one where he went through the hoop. That's what everybody remembers. Is like he went through
Right.
the like pull up hoop things. I
Oh,
don't know
right.
if those are
Muscle
called
Beach was
that.
after that. Right.
Yeah, I think Muscle Beach was later.
Right. So he made that video, and once again, Randy Slavin hooked me up with him, and he said, coincidentally, Macintosh was flying one of my drones. He had put a servo on. He had like totally modded it, hot glued it to hell. And he's just like, you guys should talk. You should make something for him. So he put me in touch with Robert. And
that was a New York Drone Film Festival winner, right?
right.
Yeah.
So he put us in touch, and I was sort of like, what are you looking for? And one of the things he was doing, he was decasing GoPros, and he had pictures of like a crate full of GoPros he had tried to decase but destroyed. And I was thinking like, why don't I make you a really small drone that can actually carry a GoPro without decasing it, so you don't have to destroy all your GoPros. So that was sort of the angle I took. And then, my thinking was the only way you can have a small drone carry something as heavy as a GoPro is maybe duct it and try to get more power out of it. So that was a concept, well, I
On
mean,
the
the
ducts.
idea of ducted fans have always been around, and like a properly designed ducted fan can like double your thrust. And as I turned out to learn later, if you like sort of like half-ass it, or do basically all I could get out of it was maybe 20% more, but it was still more. It was still enough to make at that time, a 3-inch drone carry a GoPro, whereas it wouldn't fly before. Now it could fly. So I made it, I sent him one, and he actually didn't like it that much. I don't think he ever built it or flew it. So, and it kind of languished for a while. It was sort of like and I kind of flew around as a joke because kind of funny. You could fly it like a full tilt and it would still barely move because it had so much drag. And I would fly it around my apartment. And then when Robert started messing around with Real Steady, I would send him some footage from flying around my apartment. And it was kind of weird because like there were points where you would sort of compensate and kind of do a little roll correction, and then try to like because that thing had so much drag, it didn't flow. So sometimes you try to go around, but it had so much drag it wouldn't go as far as you want. So then you have to like roll more to move it around. And I had sent him some raw footage, and he sent it back to me, and the the stabilization software just took that all out because I thought there would be like a hitch that you couldn't fix. And when I saw that, I was like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. This is almost like this could be like a real way to shoot video, because it cleaned it up so much. And still it still kind of languished, and it wasn't until Nurk kind of started messing around with it. And I remember you took it to Iceland. You flew around, I guess, the place you were renting. You did some really cool stuff with it. Also, you did some stuff where you flew through cars, through your legs, and then like down through a fjord or something like that. And what really clinched it was that I don't know if you know this, Paul, because I never talked to you about this, but I think at that time you were like pumping out. You're already like a pretty like steady YouTuber, and you were pumping out videos. I think at like a pretty pretty regular.
3 weeks, like
Yeah,
that,
you're just like, I just felt like you just had queued up videos and they were going to come out when they came out. And just coincidentally, the video you made about it came out, I think, like on the day or the day after the episode of DRL where you won came out.
Really? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
You see, there you go. And
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it at the time, and I didn't really think that much of it. And then Randy, once again, Randy Slayman, sends me like this message like, holy shit, dude, like Nurk just won DRL and his video of a squirt came out. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then, but as it turns out, that's just like, it was just like, it was always there, but then you just open everyone's eyes to this whole concept. And then it just kind of, took off from there.
Yeah, the thing about the squirt that I think really drove it home for me was that you're dropping the need to like get really nitty gritty and like decase GoPros and make them all like super minimalized to make it fly decently, and you not compromise on the structural integrity of the GoPro and its ability to fly through something and capture that moment. But then it's also to take that step further beyond the technology, kind of like we talked about with racing earlier, is now it's you have this opportunity to tell a story from a unique perspective. And so not only can you fly fast and high and low, but you can do them all in the same thing, and you can create these one take moments and these things that no other camera platform can do. And that was the thing that for me sold me on cine whooping, I guess, overall as a discipline. But then the squirt specifically is the platform to do that, because it was small and compact and you didn't have to fiddle too much. You could just go fly, and it had safety aspects and performance from the ducks and all that stuff. Like, and so for me at that moment was like, okay, I see an opportunity here to take this idea and make something of it and have some fun with it and create cool stuff. And I think that fast forwarded us to right when the 2.0 came out and we went to the Cine Museum.
Right. Actually, we did the museum on the original one. It was right after the museum when I made the 2.0.
Okay.
But that museum trip was actually also, like a big deal in the evolution of the concept of cine whooping.
Yeah. What? Tell me about this. Tell me about your your perspective on the City Museum. It was like, so the 2 or the 1.0 came out. There was a lot of cool buzz around that. It did pretty well, and then we all kind of took a trip to St. Louis. What?
Right.
How did that all come about? Did you
Well,
expect going to St. Louis?
well,
Armando.
Armando Gallegos,
Yeah.
who is like such a super nice guy that he can talk to institutions and convince them to like let us fly drones in them for 2 days in a row, without supervision, somehow.
Essentially.
Uh, yeah, so he
Pre-pandemic.
got permission to fly through what's the name of the museum? City Museum of St. Louis, right?
City Museum of St. Louis. Yep. Yep.
Right, yeah. And somehow we all were in a Facebook chat group. And he said, I can get us to fly in here for 2 days. I didn't really know Armando. And I remember, like, I was like, well, I'm a shitty pilot. I don't really go places to fly. My thing is to design, and, there's no reason for me to go somewhere to fly. I'm not going to create any content. There's no need for me to be there. And then Paul goes, but it would be fun. Like, okay.
I like to
Well,
stay away from lakes, other bodies
Yeah,
of water.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Why lose perfectly good, expensive equipment? So, went out there, and it was like super cool because not everyone, not me, but like Paul and Sean and Armando, they all had their like one take interpretations of flying through the museum. We got to do all sorts of cool experimental stuff. We did some, we put loom cubes on the squirt and did some light, flying light experiments with them. What else did you do,
Cool.
Paul? Oh, you did some stuff. You were like experimenting with the idea of like a search and rescue kind of thing.
yeah, we did some RC car chasing. That was probably my favorite part, was chasing the cars around in the
Oh, yeah,
upstairs. Yeah. So
that was
good.
crazy.
So, so you're saying that, there's not a point for you as a designer to be there on site, but like, you
It
came
turned out to
there,
be.
you
It turned out to
experimented
be.
and you experienced it, and then you went home and designed 2.0. Like what about kind of being there in person influenced the design process?
Well, I designed it to be a slow, steady, carefully piloted thing. And they get there, and you guys are like flying into walls full speed as a joke and laughing about it. I'm like, oh my god, this thing has to have more acro capabilities, has to be more durable, and that's when the ducks went from nylon to TPU. We pushed all the mass more towards the center, which made it fly better, for acro. But so, it's like more durable, had better flight characteristics. But yeah, that was like super helpful in terms of, you design something for one particular reason, but then people take it and they just do something else with it, and then you have to adapt.
Plus, at that point, what was the demand like? I mean, I'm sure you were getting lots of orders at that point, or
It was like starting to build up, but it was definitely, thanks to Paul, it was definitely picking up. But also, not I don't would be remiss not to mention that it was also on that trip that Paul got to shoot his second video of the year video, right?
Yep. Yeah. The 2018 flight of the year up on top of
Yeah,
the City Museum. And then actually the envelopment video that I did, my one take through the City Museum itself, that won some awards with like the Air Views Film Festival, which is now tied together with the New York City Drone Film
they
Festival,
now
which is
own it.
pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. But no, I want to say though that freestyle video was super cool to be there to witness in person. Another example of just being on site and being in the goggles, and like you're thinking like things that should be like a fluke, once in a lifetime fluke, and then Nurk is just like doing it again and again. And I do remember you did that one move which I've never seen again, which is sort of like this reverse kind of a spirograph move when you were inside that little
Toilet bowl
thing. Yeah, but
thing.
you did like a little toilet bowl, upside down swirly thing inside that thing.
Yeah, there was this dome, and I kind of like went up and back and forward. I just hit my hand on the fan up above me, like up and back, and like it kind of just like rolled through the thing in a really.
Well, you know those spirographs you had as a kid where you stick your pen in and there's gears and you kind of go around? So he did that with a drone.
We're kind of like in our low 30s, late 20s. Like as a
I'm
kid, I think
dating
it's
myself. I'm sorry, but there used to be a toy back before there was electricity where you had to have mechanical toys. So there was like
more
this
strong,
thing
buggy.
where
What kind of battery was it?
no batteries. It was like gears, and then you had another gear, and the gear had a hole in it, and you stick your pen in it, and you went around the outside of it, but you made like this kind of, like this. Oh, I should hold it where the camera can see. But you you made this kind of like loopy
Paul, give
pattern
me the
inside it.
description of what's happening right now.
He's kind of just holding a finger out and like just moving his other hand around it.
Completely clear what you're talking
Okay.
about.
So older people will know what I'm talking about. But basically, Paul flew into a little dome, and he did a little spirograph pattern inside it spontaneously, which I've never seen before and never seen again. And it blew my mind. But since he's too young to have a spirograph, he didn't even realize what he did. So
yeah,
there you go.
I channeled my inner older person.
Yeah, to me, the cinewhoop is this ability to fly like a tool like nothing else I know of besides these small drones. You can fly through things safely, right?
And in proximity. And,
close proximity and through things. And that's what I remember watching in that video, Paul. Not to mention, you did something pretty special too for the community in general. And this was before, I don't know, Betaflight may be better now, but you shared your settings, you shared your PIDs with everybody. And I remember on the forums constantly people were saying, hey, here's Nurk's PIDs and things like that. You helped the community. Were you tuning that drone yourself? I mean, obviously you were tuning it yourself, but take me through what it took to get to fly like that. Was it hard to tune that quad? Because it's different than imagine anything else.
Yeah, I mean, so Andy and I and Gab 707 and Mondo and Shames, we all worked on it together. We have a chat group where we kind of just go and we share all the settings as we go and kind of like, this is what's working really well for this now. These are the new settings. These are okay. This is the newest version of Betaflight. Like, how is this influencing how things are working? And you just kind of we as a group collaborated on making that work more and more and more and more and more. So when it got to like my settings were just kind of like my personalized tweaks on top of the work that group had already done. So like, it was kind of a group effort to tune it in a way, because it's a very specific craft, right? Like it's 3-inch, but it uses these ducts to generate a little bit extra power, but so it's also safe, but it's kind of heavy, but it doesn't really fly that great. And it deals with some prop wash situations that nothing else does, because there's a lot of mass, or well, not mass, but like a surface area to it. And so we kind of got that to the point where we were confident that this is like probably within a few percent the best tune that we can get. And then I just kind of put like what I preferred on top of that and then released that. So 5% of that is probably work that I actually did, apart from me like, okay, Gab made a good tune, I'm going to take that, I'm going to go fly it and be like, I just changed this to make it my own, but it makes it takes that group effort, that idea of collaboration to make these projects successful. And that's one of the things that I love the most about working with Andy and the projects that we've done together, whether I'm like a direct result or just kind of an add-on to something like that, is that you get to be a part of that design iteration process. And I think that's the next place that I'd love to go with you, Andy, is kind of thinking about like, what is the process for designing a new drone? Like, I'd love to, let's put aside the thick and the squirt and pick some specific, some drone from the past and say, what is the whole process? When you start from the beginning, and how do you get from iteration to iteration to iteration until you get to that final product? Do you have a product that you'd love to talk about, and how?
You don't pester me as much as Gab does.
Fair enough. I'm gonna.
Well, the difference between you and Gab is that Gab's never satisfied. He can never make that guy happy. Whatever you do.
Does that mean, am I better then because of that?
Pardon?
I want you to slander Gab on this podcast, please.
Yeah. What are we getting at here?
Okay, he's a robot. He won't be offended. He'll just be like, "Oh,
Right? Yeah,
this is
yeah.
okay."
It's a
It's
fact.
not up to my
It's a fact.
satisfaction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's like no matter what you do, you just ask for something more. And at first you're like, "What the fuck, dude? I just gave you what I thought was everything you wanted." For example, he wanted to fly the Black Magic, so I got it on a 7-inch hex. It's like, hey, it totally flies fine. It can totally do acro, go fast, whatever. It's no problem. And he goes like, well, what about if it was like a 7-inch X8? Like, dude, why would you? And then I thought about it. It's like, okay, he's got a point. Let's try this. But it's just like that all the time.
That's the problem with Gab, is he's always right.
Yeah. So you just don't argue with him. It's like,
At what point in the design process are you at, though, with these conversations? Are you in? First off, where do you do your modeling? I want to know a little bit more about your actual technical process. Are you doing this stuff in like Fusion 360 or AutoCAD or SolidWorks?
But yeah, we use SolidWorks.
And then the design process, are you actually creating these aircrafts and sending them out as like betas, or is it in theory at that point?
Yeah, like from the very beginning, so you have an idea, like what's the idea, what's the first step, what's the how do you test it, how do you prototype it, then like all the way
Right.
from beginning to the end, like what's the frame design if you're willing to share. Obviously we don't
Yeah,
want to give away any Shen Drones trade secrets.
nothing really. But I mean, usually for like the collaborations with Gab, usually he'll just say 5 words that'll just like uh,
Like what?
like at one point he wanted like a really sturdy filming drone with a camera up front, and the GoPro and the FPV cam would be next to each other, but they had an independent adjustment. So we made a 6-inch drone, and then from that it evolved into a 5-inch drone. And then the FPV cam was right above the GoPro, so that it was very precise in terms, because you're a flying cinematographer, right? You're the pilot and the camera operator, so you want those two. You want the FPV cam and the GoPro tied together, so you're framing the shot as you fly. And then he's like, hey, I'm getting all these jobs in like these tropical places where it's really damp. I'm doing snowboarding where there's a lot of snow, and he showed me that he had like electrical taped his entire drone up, and it still wasn't lasting the whole day. He's like, can we make it waterproof? Like, oh my God, and and then during that same time, he
I like
also
that you're reacting like, oh my God, but he's just like, can we do this? And you're like, God damn it, Gab.
Yeah, I mean, it really does stress me out. I'm really worried when he sees this. But at the same time, he also asks, he also like brought me in on a project on a drone to collect whale snot. So in the process of developing a waterproof, floatable drone, we had learned all this stuff about how much heat dissipation you had to do and all that. And so when he asked for a waterproof 5-inch drone, it was like, okay, we need a heat sink, but we don't need a heat sink as fancy as the one we put in the 8-inch drone for collecting whale snot. And so from that, another thing evolved, and so now we have like a 5-inch drone that's waterproof, that's that even though it's completely sealed, it dissipates heat well, and it's become his workhorse. He can fly an entire snowboarding job with one drone, whereas he used to have to go through 3 or 4 drones where he would fly until the snow packed in and destroy the electronics, and then he would take out the next drone. So now he can just do it on one. He can fly in the tropics. He can fly in the rain. He said he got a shot on a different island on a job. He flew to the other island, got the shot, flew back in the rain. So
Wow.
yeah. So whatever.
Through a whale's snot.
Yeah.
On the way back.
Yeah. So I mean, he dressed me. He's like never satisfied, and it kind of like, my initial reaction is like, God, come on. And then I'll just like calm down for a second. It's like, okay, that's a kind of a cool feature to try to bring in, So,
I never thought about that.
Yeah, if you want to do that to me, Paul, please, anytime.
No, I'm fine just stealing Gab's ideas and making them my own. It's fine with me. The so do you find that most of your designs are kind of driven by necessity then? Like do you kind of wait for an idea to hit you, or do you kind of go out like solving a problem, or do you just kind of like, oh, this would be fun, and you go for that?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Sometimes you come up with an idea yourself, but it's always good to get inspiration elsewhere. I mean, what I try not to do is I try to get inspiration from people with the needs. I don't try to look at other frame designers and say, "Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna, like take that from someone else." So I'd rather get the ideas from the end users rather than like my direct competitors. So I really
Hmm.
actually like fairly oblivious to like other drone makers. Um,
Sure.
yeah, I mean, it's just sort of like almost like a courtesy to not steal ideas, But
Yeah, you're purposefully kind of turning a blind eye to what other people are doing and focusing on solving a problem with
yeah,
people that you know, and people that you know are doing good work.
right. I've been sort of lucky to be, working with top echelon people like you and Gab and like Finky and guys like that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
uh,
How do you feel about because of you and your developments, cinewhoops have become incredibly popular and they're now available on lots of different manufacturers. How do you feel about that? I mean, you can't ignore that, right? I mean,
uh, well,
are you trying to
let,
improve
let,
upon it?
Might not be a great time to tell you, but I'm actually reviewing my first bind and fly cinewhoop.
HD.
okay. Well, first of all, the true OG is Robert McIntosh. So let's first just acknowledge that, it's none of this exists without Macintosh. So we're all just like
No.
standing on the shoulders of giants.
Love to
Um,
get him on the show, by the way. Just a shout out
yeah,
if you're listening, Mr. McIntosh.
yeah. I had a
Yeah.
chance to have dinner with him, and I was like,
You had a dinner with Macintosh.
yeah. So I had the chance to have dinner with Macintosh, but I like, punked out like a little bitch. It's like, oh, I'm tired.
Wait, you bailed on Robert?
It was just like
Oh my gosh.
it was like so last. Once again, it was Randy Slavin who said like, "Hey, I'm going out to dinner with Macintosh on account."
Suddenly I'm glad you don't bail on me when I'm in New York.
I know,
Like the last
I
time I was
know.
there, I hit you up at like 1 a.m. I was like, "Hey, let's have a drink." You're like, "Oh, I come over." That's not a problem, but you can't go to dinner with the godfather of city living?
I learned my lesson. This is afterwards, so I learned my lesson, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
got you.
not that dumb.
Well, anyway, to go back to my question, is it not so it doesn't bother you because, or does it? I mean, are there ways? Are there when you look at a different frame, are they? Do you
Eh,
look at something and dismiss it, or does it inspire you in the same way? It's challenging you to like rethink, some of the things that you've been doing.
okay, I mean, a lot of my stuff has been cloned in the past, and a
Hmm.
lot of times you find with cloners is that they clone the shape, but people that do it don't actually fly FPV. So they'll copy stuff without knowing why it's there, and it's really
Mm.
apparent. So a lot of these clones, I feel the same way. It's sort of like you can't just put the props in a tube because it actually like the ducks on the squirt generate more power, but if you put just a straight tube on it, it actually kills the power. It reduces the power. So it's like doubly stupid, right?
Hmm.
So when I see that, it just drives me crazy because unlike other frame makers that share everything in these blog posts, it's like you could have gone there. You could have downloaded the profile of the ducks. Like how lazy are you?
Yeah, and just read through like, "This is
Right.
why I did this. Here are the
Oh,
trust test results
I
for
mean,
why this
if you're gonna clone someone,
Wow.
like I would be the easiest one to clone, right? Because then like I actually tell you what I'm doing and I'll like give you links and stuff like that. So it bothers me in that way. It's like how lazy are you? But at some point, you can't stop it. We don't sell enough drones to hire lawyers to file a patent to sue people. If you're gonna think about it, it's just gonna make you crazy. Why make yourself crazy? So just like let it roll over you.
Well, it seems like you kind of just maybe like you're working on a lot of different ideas. So, you probably
Right.
have a couple, pans on the stove.
Right. The solution is to just keep moving ahead so they can you can't like look backwards. You just have to keep moving ahead. Let them clone the thing that you're working on 2 iterations ago. So I mean, I really enjoy just designing. I don't really like the marketing, the business part of it. I don't like want to like have like a big drone company or anything. I mean, I really know that what makes me happy is just to design and iterate and make things and work with cool people and interact with people and develop cool stuff. So if people are cloning stuff and like taking a bite out of your sales, you just can't let it bother you. Just I'm doing what I love to do, and it's enough to support me, and so I just don't worry about it.
I feel the same way about content creation. You have to be satisfied with
Yes,
your own work before you put value in what anyone else
yeah.
says.
I had that same exact conversation with Gab because I was kind of like had one of those days where I was kind of bitching and moaning, and I said like, you don't have this problem, you don't no, and he's like, are you kidding me? People copy my flights. Like, oh, of course, I've seen, yeah, right. So it's the same exact thing with like you with pilots. It's like you do a cool flight, someone will come in and just like copy it, and not give you any credit, not acknowledge you, and just try to
Oh, this was my idea. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
But they
100%.
can't copy the relationships you have, right? I mean, that's what you just said before is like, it's those relationships that are going to challenge you to make the next thing. And,
And I would say it's even more than a relationship. It's about like personal gratification, right? It's if you can't intrinsically be satisfied with the work that you're doing, then you're going to try to find a value proposition in external sources, right? If you can't find intrinsic value in the work that you're doing, if you're looking at external sources to generate that value proposition for you, you're never going to be satisfied, right? Because there's always going to be that one person that comes in and says something negative. There's always going to be moments where you have the temptation to generate your own personal value based on what someone else says. So if you can't find an opportunity to say, I am happy with how this works and how this is done, and be satisfied with that work, you're always going to be lacking. And I think that's true for content creation. That's true for working in the film industry. That's true for designing a drone frame. That's true for freaking raising a family.
right.
Like, that's a human condition thing, not just something related to these sorts of things. So I applaud you for intentionally choosing not to look at what others are doing and
no, I mean,
finding an itch to scratch, something that you can pull satisfaction
yeah.
out of in your own life.
Now I'm gonna blow smoke right back up your ass, and I'm gonna say,
Woo!
no. For
Sorry.
example, the gratification comes when like we were at that Neil deGrasse Tyson thing, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching you do this piloting, and I'm thinking this is just unworldly, and we're here at Neil deGrasse Tyson's office and all that, and the fact that this guy with his incredible skills is like using the tool I created to do this. That's what it's all about. It's not so much about right, yeah, like my market share is being taken up by these people who are making clones or whatever. It's just
Yeah,
yeah,
great.
yeah.
No, I'm glad that you're taking the time to recognize that, and I want everyone that's listening to also be thinking about those sorts of things. Like I have people come to me all the time, ask like, how do I build an audience on YouTube, or well, like or whatever it is. It's like it all at the end of the day, if you are not building satisfaction in yourself and building up yourself as a human and finding a way to make those kinds of sustainable decisions, you're not going to do those things in the first place. And so you take the lessons that Andy is teaching you, that John is teaching you, that I'm teaching you. It's all about find a way to be satisfied with the work that you're doing before anything else, because at the end of the day, someone else's opinion is not going to matter.
Yeah. And if you believe in that, surround yourself with like-minded people, and
Absolutely.
support each other. So go out and buy a Shen drone is what I'm trying to say,
Woo!
go.
Oh,
That's a right turn right there.
oh,
I'm
let's talk about this for a few seconds. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The big baby.
I love that thing. That was one of the coolest videos I've seen in a long time, and yeah, it's an incredible little guy. I feel like it's maybe even potentially going to blow up more than the cinewhoop. I mean, it's a cinewhoop, but
Yeah.
dangerous looking.
I kind of feel like it has limited purpose.
Yeah, it's kind of a niche thing. Like that was kind of
Rips.
my I kind of look at it and I was like, I don't know if I need that in my life. But I'm like, okay, this would be really fun to build. So I was like, all right, let's find a way
Well,
to
then
do
the
it.
first
And
thing you said when I showed you a picture of it is like, yes, but why?
yes, exactly. But we talked about it, and like it's reduced surface area, condensed mass, more power. So there's things like flying in high wind conditions where it's better. Where if you need to go from really really slow and precise to really fast, it can do it. Like the punch out on it is freaking ridiculous. I actually didn't really recognize it until I was like reviewing my footage on the
Yeah,
video that I made about it, because I was just like, whoa, that's fast. And so you think about like it's I think it's one of those areas where we're kind of like, yeah, here's kind of an idea, but then it took on a life of its own, and it's starting to become like I'm starting to kind of get an idea of how powerful a tool like that could be. And I think that's one of the fun things about just trying stuff, right?
yeah.
That's the opportunity that we have as creators, as inventors, as entrepreneurs, in a way. Like we can just kind of like, oh, let's just try shit and see what happens. Like, and I think the Big Baby is a perfect example of
When
that.
you were in New York, I kept saying to you, like, what the hell is your life, man? What's with your
I
life?
don't know.
I know. It's like you get to
Well,
travel
let
around.
let me just like rewind real. What were you holding up right there for our listeners? Who can't follow along on the video.
Oh
What
yeah,
is
good
that
point.
drone?
What's the Big Baby,
It's the
Andy?
Big Baby. It's a 3-inch X8 octocopter, and I kind of made it.
So that's coaxial motor. So like motors stacked on top of each other. There's only 4 arms. There's 2 motors stacked on top of each other, and they're 3-inch ones.
Yeah,
I still wish I could get those freaking middle standoffs in there.
And on top of
yeah,
that is looks like a GoPro Hero 8 full
Yep.
yeah,
size, and
yeah.
with a
Not cased.
with an HD DJI HD FPV system full size in
Yep,
there.
Full
yeah.
size, not a Cadex.
And a video popped up on the YouTubes a couple days ago of Nurk absolutely just shredding one around his house, and then he took it out to the field and he's flying backwards through fences, like gaps that I would.
My Eastgate buddy Dane.
Yeah, and that was really really cool stuff. I mean, you were confidently hitting these like tiny gaps where it's kind of brought me back to the Robert McIntosh videos. It's like, whoa, that camera just passed through that little effortlessly without even like full confidence, and it's just like that's like unlocking another level of creativity. I think for the filmmaker is like gives you that ability. So that's what I saw. That's what I felt when I watched you fly that thing.
That brings me back to that struggle of like finding, how do we tell a story with this platform? How do we find a new, like what can we add to something that no other camera platform can do, and how do we do it without being gratuitous? How do we like go in and say, this is why you should tell this story this way? And I I haven't found the answer yet for the thick, for the
Right.
Big Baby. I found it for the Squirt, I think, in a lot of different ways. But that's one of the things that excites me the most about those projects is it's like, okay, what can we do now? What is this problem that we can solve with this powerful tool? And that's what I think excites me the most about
Has
working
there,
on these projects.
has there been a big budget FPV shop that we know of?
Yeah, I don't know how many are public, but I know of some that
Okay.
are big budget. Yeah, but I don't, it's tricky to figure out like what's the advantage of not having stabilization and introducing vibrations in the props and all of these kinds of things. Like people seem to want it, but why and how and what is it adding? And those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to figure out how to answer ahead of time so that I can go into a conversation with a director or a producer and pitch them and say, okay, yeah, you could do this with a Alta X with an RE Alexa, but what if we did it this way? And what different kind of story could we tell? And how would that add to the moment of this thing? And that's the hard part, is just finding someone with the vision for that, I think.
John, I want to ask you, how many DPs are okay with the idea of horizon tilting?
That's the biggest issue that I have.
What's he really asking there? If you could answer that as well.
Okay, yeah. So Dutch angle is something that used to be hot, I guess, back in the days, where like the the horizon's not level. That's one of the biggest challenges as a camera operator is to manage that, to maintain a level horizon. That's my goal with Inspire 2 systems. They do not manage their horizon well. A lot of times, with the remote head, it's called resolve. So how does this remote head resolve? And that's it's looking at these big Libra heads, which cost an arm and a leg, tens of thousands of dollars. Libra heads are the best remote heads available that go on the end of these monster remotes cranes, right? A lot of times you hear the technicians and the operators talk about two things. Does it drift? And we're talking about at all. And if it drifts, that's not good. And how does it resolve? Which is the hold the horizon. These are two major things that operators and DPs look at the technology should do.
But what I'm asking is, aesthetically, will they accept it? Because that's sort of part of FPV.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like, if they're going to say, at some point, they're going to say, "I like that look where you bank."
Yeah, it's the POV. I think those POV shots is where I can see it right now as a fit, or the dive bombing shots, as if you're falling off a building, like or jumping off a building or skyscraper or something like that.
Like
yeah,
hooks onto them and dives down. Right.
Yeah, and I think what's happening is the FPV shots are influencing DPs a little bit because, we're seeing this content now on national television. There's a lot of really, popular commercials, spots that feature FPV work now.
Right.
Because those little 3.5 second shots, they're trying to maximize the excitement in that short amount of time. And nothing does that better than an FPV drone shot where you're doing some organic maneuver, this acrobatic shot, even for that split second. So I think, if we continue to create this amazing content like no other, like it's never been able to do before using these FPV drones, I think you're going to see DPs kind of catch wind to this. It's going to become a trend. I think it's going to continue to get better. So I think DPs will be more accustomed to thinking about, say, they might not even know what it's called, but they say, hey, I want a shot like this. And I think it was from a drone or something.
Right.
I don't care what it's from.
Right.
They just want a shot like that.
How you did it, just do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And they might be able to do it, a good key grip might be able to do it without even using a drone. And, so you might even start to see influence of these FPV shots trickle into other cinematography. For a while, you saw like the roll, like this, like, when it's, what is it?
The Inception gimbal.
Yeah. Matrix mode is, so you can turn these heads sometimes and you can do these, whatever. It kind of gets the viewer, the audience, like kind of uncomfortable a little bit out of the usual, what they're used to seeing. And I think FPV shots and cinema will kind of turn to that. There's also the idea of, making your shot look as cinematic as possible and then change it up on them. So like you can do these moves where it is perfectly level. That's what I like to do. And then you kind of you carry the momentum of I'd like to think of the FPV shots a lot of time as like it's a character, right? So you're able to move the momentum of the audience kind of down into the maneuver. So
that would be really cool if you did, like how you have those show reels of like beautiful landscapes and it's just like a slow push in, and you do that for a while and then suddenly that would be really cool.
Surprises people.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. That's what it's all about. It's like, how do you use your camera to surprise the audience? And I don't think, I guess in the film industry, they use the term gag a lot. So it's like, a lot of times when they do these camera gags, sometimes it could be a POV shot or a crash cam where they like stick a camera in a box and then they throw it down a flight of steps. And those are gags. And I think an FPV is a great gag shot. It can be a really powerful gag shot. And that, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it as a powerful tool to be used. And we're we're trying to figure out exactly how to do that. Not to mention they're durable as fuck. So you could, repeatedly like create some pretty good abuse for this thing and fly it through branches and it's not going to fall out of the sky. It's pretty cool. So
absolutely.
Are DPs asking for that yet? Not necessarily the people that I've worked with. I'm sure there are some out there, and more power to them. I think they're going to be able to create some really, really captivating content, and hopefully turn some heads. And that's what it's all about. everyone wants to make the best film they possibly can. So without taking
Yeah,
too much risk and to embarrass themselves or look like an idiot or whatever. But I think
at the end of the day, like, good filmmaking is kind of partially good marketing. It's like something that is unique, something that is capturing the attention of audiences and pulling them in and keeping their attention for a long time.
yeah, and like so it's I think the innovation here that's happening on a manufacturer level,
Like at Shen drones.
yeah, like at Shen drones, yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, I think
I know you're trying to sum up. I'm just going to 30 seconds. It's sort of like, when you're in it, you want to accentuate it. You want to do everything that it can do. But you have to go back to the filmmaker's point of view, which does it tell the story? Does it serve the purpose? And ultimately, the filmmakers don't want the tools to be apparent. So no matter how cool, how great a pilot you are, you don't want the audience to like, oh, wow, he did a split S. You just want them to be immersed in the story. So that's sort of like the point where we're in, where we can do all this cool stuff, but how do we integrate it into filmmaking to tell the story, but not be the center of attention?
That's a really good way to put it. Actually, I haven't thought about it like that. Is how do you not? Well, I mean, in those specific words, like, how do you not pull someone out of it and to the point where they're wondering how they do that,
Right.
but keep them in it so much that they're just pulled into the story here, like, and that's the balance that, especially with FPV, we're trying to ride is how do you engage the audience to the point where you're not sucking them out of what's going on screen. It's very interesting. Wow. Well, on that,
hello,
it's fine. It's part of the fun of podcasting is we get to have everything mess up. John's just kind of like,
I'm just reflecting on what Andy said. I mean, I'm just like trying to take it like the wisdom. I completely agree with what you just said there, Andy. My favorite drone shots are not. I don't want them to feel like drone shots.
It's kind of like a Greatest Showman kind of drone shot.
Well, it's just something that kind of just it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, and I think that's what the cinewhoop enables me to do. I'm able to do these fly through type of shots now, and create this moving camera platform, which you like physically can't do any other way. So it's been great to get to know Andy and
I think we lost Andy 100% now.
What a way to end the show.
Oh, wait, is he back?
Hello.
We're over here blowing smoke up your ass again. Andy, Mr. Shen, MrShenDrones.com himself. Do you have any social media websites, anything that you want to plug? Any projects coming up that you'd like to talk about? This is your chance to spread it to our hundreds of listeners.
It's like hot one. This camera. What do you got going on?
Exactly.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. If I could be half the interview that Sean Evans is.
I am locked in my house every single day. Every day is about 5 o'clock cocktail hour. And what are we having for dinner?
Quarantinis.
So going on. Exactly. Yeah. That's what I got going on. Thank you so much.
But you should go check out Shen Drones on Instagram at Shen Drones. There's a Shen Drones Facebook page. There's a cinewhoopers Facebook page. There's shendrones.com. There's 2 scoops of mochi, which is a great
mochi.
You've seen, if you're watching the video, you've seen him in the background walking up and down on the couch. The gorgeous little corgi.
Nice.
They're so awkward. Yeah. I've got German Shepherds, so like real dogs.
Wait, and we walked Mochi together, and you and Justin could not take your eyes off her butt, which was super disturbing. That was so wrong.
Because everybody else was you're just like walking around, like every single New Yorker's like, oh my God, that's a little cute dog. I'm like, okay, my dog's, you'd walk on the other side of the street, which is great because then I get the whole place to myself. It's good. But so yeah, please go check out Shen Drones, buy some frames, have some fun, and know the process that has gone into designing these frames is not just based on what's hype or what's going on or what, you know, other people are doing. It's based on solving the needs of the FPV community and creating new kinds of content that you've never seen before. That is
And
the path-
science, pure
science.
and pure science. This guy is a brilliant
That's
mind
great.
over there.
Yeah, this guy has got arrested for you to make sure that your drone frames are exactly what you need. So thank you, Andy, for hanging out tonight on the Good Flight podcast. Everybody go check out everything that he's got going on and keep flying the good flight.
A song so nice we play it twice.
Andy's losing over there. I love it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.